We've got a Fox News alert for you right now. The march to the midterms in November, setting up a Florida showdown between a Trump-backed candidate and a Bernie Sanders-backed candidate.
Congressman Ron DeSantis securing the Republican nomination for governor. He'll take on Andrew Gilman in November after the Democrat pulled off an upset win last night.
Yeah, that is going to be a great matchup. In Arizona, Congresswoman Martha McSally emerged from a three-way Republican Senate primary. She'll face off against a formidable foe in Kristen Sinema in the fall, which makes me want to bring in Newt Gingrich to get a perspective on what he got from last night. And it turns out Newt's up ready with a great tie. Newt, first off, interesting matchup in Florida. This gubernatorial race is going to be Bernie Sanders against Donald Trump using surrogates, don't you think?
Sure, look, it's a perfect race. The president once again proved his muscle in helping Ron DeSantis win the nomination by a big margin when DeSantis originally was the underdog. The president likes DeSantis a lot. And frankly, the contrast in Florida between an absolute socialist who only got 34% of the primary vote and a conservative Republican pro-Trumper is going to be about as wide as you could get. And that's going to fit what's happening in the Senate race, where I think Governor Rick Scott is going to decisively beat the Democratic incumbent, Bill Nelson. So Florida, when people start talking about a blue wave, you ought to point out to them, Florida is likely to be a desert island for the Democrats with no wave at all, given these kind of outcomes. And by the way, in Arizona, President Trump was very gracious and supportive of Congresswoman McSally when they had the signing ceremony for the National Defense Authorization Act. She was the first woman to fly in combat and has a remarkable record. I think she's going to win the Senate race there. And again, this so-called blue wave is going to disappear in the sand. And I think you're going to see, if anything, more of a red wave by the time we get to November than a blue wave.
Well, let's see. Well, Newt, regarding Martha McSally out in Arizona, you know, it goes to show you how quickly the Republican Party has changed. Because in 2016, she kept her distance from Donald Trump and wouldn't even say whether or not she voted for him in the general election. And now, out in Arizona, it was a race to see who could embrace him the most between the Dr. Kelly Ward and her and Joe Arpaio. And ultimately, McSally won.
Look, I'm writing a op-ed today for Fox News pointing out that Trump is winning and winning and winning. He's winning on judges. He's winning on NAFTA negotiation with Mexico. He just won in the primaries once again this week. And despite all of the effort of the liberal media, what you see is a steady consolidation of a set of ideas. And I want to raise this California thing because it may become one of the great moments in American history. The candidate for governor of California, who was the former mayor of San Francisco, a city which now has a specialty patrol going around every single day cleaning up human feces because they have so many people who are defecating the street. I mean, this guy now wants to do for all of California what he's done for San Francisco, and it combines with what Senator Feinstein did in the Senate. She introduced a bill that is essentially an open borders bill. Now, he basically comes along and says, I'd like to make sure that if you get across the border, you'll get free health care. Well, you know, if the Gavin Newsom model works, you realize all around the planet how many people who have a disease are going to say, you know, I just got to get to California for my free health care. This is close to madness.
And if he has his way, you'll be able to walk right across the border, and that San Diego fence will be penetrable.
That's true. Well, switching gears here, Mr. Speaker, Lanny Davis, of course, Democrat, Hillary Clinton advocate for many, many years. He is under fire for changing his story as a source for CNN. And now the Washington Post is actually calling out one of the journalists from Watergate, and he is facing questions about a new report. Here's the headline. A journalist of Watergate faces Watergate fame faces questions about a blockbuster Trump piece. Carl Bernstein, using Lanny Davis as an anonymous source, and then Lanny Davis changing his story publicly, but CNN not correcting the piece.
Yeah, CNN still stands by the report as source, as Lanny said, yeah, I got it wrong.
Well, look, there are two parts to the story. As the president has pointed out, when you start seeing anonymous sources coming from fake news systems that are dedicated to left-wing ideas, you ought to ask yourself, why is the source that anonymous? And, of course, as I just saw on the show earlier, a few minutes ago, you have all of these things out there that Mueller could go after about all the weird things that were going on in the FBI, the way in which they got the FISA warrants, all of that stuff, none of which he wants to touch. Now you have Lanny Davis. I've known Lanny for years. Lanny is a great guy. I don't know he's a very good lawyer, but he's a great guy. But I think it's a little weird to have a guy who was so close to Bill and Hillary Clinton now showing up trying to defend a Republican. And I think Lanny probably is just wrapped up in not quite remembering which story he told to who.
Well, here's the problem. It matters. If Donald Trump knew about the Don Jr. meeting at the Trump Tower, that's a big story. If it didn't happen, that's a bigger story, especially when you don't admit that your sources have dried up and one has admitted they weren't telling the truth. For CNN and Carl Bernstein to stand by this story is outrageous.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I think there's a simple test. If the source wasn't Lanny, who has now repudiated the story, then who's your source?
Yeah.
Now, if you're telling us you don't have any source at all, this is called fiction, and you should put it on as a fiction piece, and the Washington Post can start having a fiction section, which, frankly, about half the paper would fit in.
Well,
CNN
yeah, we will see what happens. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich, thank you so much.